kings, we pound for pound. UFC thrills, stills nights get loud. Big EQP, that's how we get down.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the GRP. Happy New Year to everybody out there. This being the second day of January. We just missed it. Could have had a show on the New Year if it would have landed right. But who am I kidding? I probably wouldn't have. Well, maybe I would have actually, because I podcasted last night. So that's okay. I think I might have done it anyway. It's not like Christmas and stuff. New Year's Day is just recovering and thinking about how you're going to try to make this year better. But yeah, we're back finally. Took last week off. Just put a video out there, thanking everybody for the support and everything like that, and wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. Talked about the Fury Usyk fight for a quick second because that's all it was really worth. I mean, it was a decent fight. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it wasn't the best either. So I guess in the end, there's not much to talk about with that one. I planned on possibly talking about it today, but there's no point. I mean, Usyk won. Fury thought he kind of edged it out, but most people say Usyk won. It wasn't very close, really, if you look at it closely and realize the fact that, Fury just didn't look like the Fury of the last fight. I mean, the last fight that they had together it was a banger, kind of. So, I mean, we say that a lot about a lot of fights, but this time, with that fight, it was actually worthy and worth saying that about it. So anyway, yeah, so we're back finally. Unfortunately, there's no fights this week. There was no fights last week. And then we have another week after that with no fights. But next week, no, I'm sorry. This is the last week. Next week's show, I should look at a calendar so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Oh my God, here we go with Tommy. Tommy likes to make up names for our viewers at the Technically Unsound podcast. So he's taking it upon himself to call everybody for the GRP. Well, you can read it in the chat, but go in the chat and tell me if you think that's a good name. I'm not sure I believe it is. I feel like it's not the best. It's funny, but it's not the best name. So anyway, let me go back. Okay, so this weekend will be the 4th. Next weekend, yes. Okay, so not this Saturday, but the next Saturday on the 11th will be finally a UFC fight night. And then on the 18th will be the first pay-per-view of the year. So I'm pretty excited about that one. There will be Mud MMA, Gaethje versus Hooker, rumored for 313. Yeah, that would be a banger of a fight. Both those guys just like to get hit and hit people. They'll take punches to give them, and they're willing to go to war. So that would be a damn good fight if that rumor comes to fruition. So thanks for that heads up there, Mud MMA. I guess sometimes I have to drop down the name a little bit because I can't say it over and over again. But thanks for the interaction. The chat's open, guys. I'm here to talk about all of MMA. But today I'll be recapping basically just the UFC, the year of 2024, obviously, that just passed, because there hasn't been any fights. There will not be any fights until the 11th. So wanted to get some content out there, wanted to talk about a few things. So there is a little bit of combat sports news, as you saw there by Mud MMA said, gave us a rumored fight. That's good. There's a few other ones rolling around out there. We'll get to that. But as of right now, we're just going to review last year and mainly the pay-per-views, because that's where all the big stuff happened. I can't talk. Maybe I need to take a little hit of some good stuff here, because I always got to give a shout out to my sponsor, Noctane smelling salts. Oh, I always hold it on the wrong side too. Now everything's changed. I changed my whole setup, so now I can just do this. Noctane smelling salts. If you need to wake up and be alert and get a nice little rush of adrenaline, you're going to see me wince and what looks like pain in a minute, but really it's good stuff. But you shake it and you activate the good stuff in here, and you take a good whiff. Ooh, just like that. And I know that doesn't look pleasant, but it's a second or two of harshness for a good amount of time of alertness. So I like it. Smelling salts, if you don't know, now you know. But a lot of power lifters and stuff like that use these to get that bit of adrenaline rush before they do some lifting. I use them a lot for stuff like this when I'm driving long distances because I tend to get a little sleepy. And when I just need to be awake and alert and I don't have any other way of doing it, and you want to keep it legal. Infinity said death sniff. He knows what it's about because he's got himself a bottle too. This is the red cap. It's the most potent. That's why I had such a reaction. Don't get it twisted. The other ones are really good too. They have a medium strength. It's a black cap and then a white cap for the lowest strength. So if you're just getting into it, you can check it out. But they definitely work. Infinity has the mid strength one, the black cap, and he likes them. So they're good for a lot of things. Go check it out. Follow that QR code right there. I'm still getting used to my setup. I move things around, but follow that QR code. Check out their website. It's a good website. It looks nice. And if you go all the way to the bottom of the homepage, you see that it says proudly sponsoring the Going Rounds podcast, and that's us. So check it out and get yourself a bottle. Try them out. I guarantee you'll like them. It's a good product. So thanks to Noctane for the sponsorship. But yeah, hopefully everybody had a good New Year's. Yesterday was just a chill day for me. I did a lot of prep work for this though, but did some podcasting last night with the boys from Technically Unsound Podcast. That's another show I'm on. Talk about a lot of other things other than MMA. But we always bring it up. You know, they like to give my show a shout out here, so I always do the same. Plus, I'm on that show as well, so might as well, right? But Tommy in the chat and DJ Infinity, they're both part of the Technically Unsound podcast and the crew there. We also have DJ Magics, so go check it out. We go live on Tuesdays and Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Arizona time. So you can go to technicallyunsound.com and subscribe there and check it out. So, but yeah, we did some podcasting last night, which was fun. And we're doing a little bit of some different stuff there, multi-streaming on YouTube like I am right now, and then also on TikTok. So you can catch us live on TikTok there as well. I plan on doing that with this show in the near future. I need to kind of get a little handle on it and test it out a little bit here and there. I've gone live once on TikTok just to try it out and just talked about some random stuff. Listened to the chat a little bit and just explained a little about the show. So that was fun. It was a while back. I haven't done it again since, of course, because it was just one of those quick things that I did. But I definitely want to do that with the show. Maybe drive some more viewers over here to my channel here on YouTube. I'm always looking to grow the channel, always looking to get, some more subscribers, more viewers, get more people interested in the show. So if you're here and watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Hit that notification bell too, so you always know when I'm live. And like everything, share it, do all the good stuff you're supposed to do on YouTube, and help me grow my channel. That'd be much appreciated. But other than that, yesterday, not much. The night before, got to hang out with the fam. Some of my family had a little bit of one of my kids had a little issue at their place that they stay at with water and stuff like that. So they had been around for the past few days, and that was fun because my kids are older and one of them has moved out of the house already. So don't get to see her as much as usual. Don't get to really spend the times that we used to. So that was good. That was fun. It was a nice way to bring in the new year. Both my kids were here, and we got to hang out and play some games and do a little drinking for the new year and ring it in all together and having fun. So I appreciate that a lot. And it was a good way to bring in the new year. So hopefully everyone else had as much of a good time, if not more. And just appreciate all your family, man. That's always the biggest thing you got to remember. And one of those things I try to remind myself all the time, no matter what, no matter how much irritation or just lack of things that get done that you want to get done, who cares? All of it is meaningless in the end because, you just got to love your family and keep them close. So, and that's something I like to do because it wasn't for my kids, I don't know where the hell I'd be right now. But and they support me, the hell out of me with this podcast and everything else I do. And I like to support them as well. Along with my wife, she's the rock and the glue that holds everything together over here. So I appreciate her. Definitely gotta always give her a shout out because she does a lot for the fam and me and everything else here. So, but yeah, my daughter, Tenet Trend on Twitch is her handle. She streams on Twitch a lot. She's a gamer and a streamer, so go check her out. She posts on YouTube here as well. It's always a fun thing to watch and hang out and listen to her struggle with the game, have fun with the game, and battle those haters on the chat, because you know how that goes if you play any video games online. It's always a mixed bag of what you're gonna get there, but it's fun. So check her out, Tenet Trend, everywhere. Go follow her. But yeah, Infinity knows what's up. He said can't beat the family time for sure. I know he spent a lot of time with his family over these holidays, so everyone did, it seemed like, so that's good. No one seemed to have a real bad time, so that's always the best to hear. Other than that, man, just missing MMA. I just can't wait for everything to come back. You know, we had the one boxing match to get through the first week of not having MMA, but now I'm just like, damn, let's go. I changed my setup, like I said, because when we have the watch party, I kind of did a little makeshift thing and I was rolling with that because it was working. But the more I went, the more I wanted a change and a difference. And without having to scrap everything I have in here and buy a bunch of new stuff, I did a little bit of a modification of my setup and how things work in here. So as you can see, I'm a little off center. I used to be center in the screen, but I feel like it's a nice change of aesthetic and stuff. Not a big deal to be right in the middle, I don't think. And then I have a background to see as well. So, but also, get a little different view here, a little behind the scenes. As you can see, I've got this part of my desk out here. So now I'm going to have everyone kind of around the table instead of just floating out in the middle of nowhere. I feel like it's going to be better for conversation, easier for us to hang out, and it's going to look a little more natural when we're on screen. So if you're into watching, you know, watch parties, basically watch the fights with us. I can't show the fights, but we comment on all the fights happening, and you know, we just like to have fun. And sometimes the commentary on the fights gets a little boring. You can always go back and listen to that later. I'm sure most of you that are diehard fans rewatch the fights anyway. So, but yeah. Oh, my mom. I got to see my mom these past couple weeks too, so that was good. She said I enjoyed her visit. Hopefully we can do it again sometime soon. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be visiting you again soon. I got something for you. So thanks for watching and supporting me too. I appreciate that. But yeah, so I moved everything around. I feel like it's going to be a better setup, and we will test that out come the 18th. So it's a little fun stuff, a little fun news. Here's a little other angle of the command center here, or as Tommy calls it, NASA. That's because I always have so many screens going and stuff like that. But I like to monitor things. I like to make sure I have plenty of space to do whatever I want on the fly and not be struggling. So as you can see, I got my interface over there for all the audio stuff, my stream deck, all kinds of good shit. So yeah, there's a little insight into the changes here made for the new year. So I'm excited about it. I'm happy. It's been working so far with the Technically Unsound podcast when I've been podcasting with them. Yeah, so far the setup is nice and good and working out for me. But I almost forgot about my drink. Got to take that first sip before we get into things. Oh, look at that. I always got something missing here. There we go. Okay. So let's get started because we got a little bit of combat sports news to go with. Thanks again to everybody who's here live. Appreciate you guys interacting with the chat and stuff like that. Feel free to do that throughout the show. I always like to, interact and answer any questions or react to any statements made. So I'll be doing that throughout the show as well. So check it out. Here we go with a little bit of combat sports news. The little bit we have to go off of right now. And we're going to start with good old Conor McGregor. Making headlines in some of the worst ways in the past couple months here, but this time he's in the news for what he's known for, making money. And he does that. He really does that. He may have lost some stuff that made him money with all of the controversy and allegations and stuff rolling around in the news, but a lot of people weren't aware of any of that. So it's big news in Ireland, where he's from, because that's where it happened, and that's where the case, the civil case, was taking place. But I mean, here in the States, everyone knows who Conor McGregor is. So, you know, when the news gets around over here, people are kind of wondering and you know, maybe not following it, but paying attention here and there. And now we get some different kind of news from him, some fight news, which we haven't heard about in a while, because every time we hear about him fighting in MMA, it gets pushed back, it gets postponed, it gets, you know, canceled, whatever else you want to talk about, because him and Chandler were supposed to fight like 3 different times now, and it's been forever. But yeah, now there's a rumor going around, and it sounds like it's pretty much confirmed now that him and Logan Paul will be boxing, which I figured if he's boxing anybody in the Paul family, it would be Jake Paul, because they have talked massive shit to each other back and forth for a while. And since Jake Paul's gotten big in boxing, and well, he's a big mouth just like Conor, so of course they're going to go back and forth. But Logan Paul has stepped up to the plate apparently, and they've been offered to earn $250 million each in a mega fight set for Mumbai's Wankhede Stadium, I think that is, as part of Visit India tourism campaign. So in India, there's a big family, a very big name family. The name I just cannot remember right now, because nobody will know it anyway. But they can just throw money away and not care. So for $250 million each, these guys are gonna box each other, supposedly. I haven't seen any contracts signed yet, but this is the word around everywhere. The weird thing is MVP, Most Valuable Productions, which is Jake Paul's production company, said cap on cap on cap. That's what they said. So who knows? Logan, you know, reposted something on his story on Instagram, showing kind of the headline with him and Conor's face, and he just did the eyes emoji. So you know how it goes. They gotta build it up. They gotta talk about it a little bit and make people wonder, and then they come out with the news when it's official. So that's what I'm waiting on. But this is coming from the Mac Life, and obviously Conor McGregor, as you can see here, this is a tweet that was put out, and Conor reposted, tagged the Mac Life official, because they're the ones that posted this originally, which that is his, you know, media outlet. So yeah, yes, that is Logan Paul Infinity. That's who they're talking about fighting here against Conor. So it's a little bit weird. You would think that, like I said, it'd be Jake Paul, because he's been the one making his name and making all the headlines with boxing. But I feel like that's something that people would be interested in. But the Logan Paul thing came out of nowhere, and that's what it's looking like. You gotta, I mean, people don't like the Paul brothers, but you gotta give it to them, man. I mean, that Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight may have been kind of a shit show and not very worth it, and not very exciting. But Jake Paul has fought a legend in the sport, someone you never would have thought that he would fight, and he fights Mike Tyson. Logan Paul fought a legend in the sport, someone you would never think he'd fight, with Floyd Mayweather. So these guys have fought some big names, and yes, maybe it's a cash grab. Yes, maybe it's for publicity, for views, for whatever you want to call it. But these guys are getting in there and doing it regardless. Now, the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight, everyone talks about the pulled punches, about the talking, about all that. Infinity says marketing masters. He's said it before, he'll say it again, and he's telling the fucking truth. They are marketing masters. And I guess you got to be a little cringe in order to be a marketing master, but they make it work. So I got to give them their props on that. But you know, regardless of any of the allegations or any of the bullshit that goes on with the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight, in the end, you know, Jake Paul could have annihilated Tyson if Tyson was being 100% legit in that fight. And if he wasn't, maybe he could have taken out Jake Paul. But either way, they did it. It happened. It's over. And that's now in the history books. So, and Logan, like I said, fought against Floyd Mayweather. So these guys are making big money, fighting against big names in the sport. And this is just another one of those. So, in my opinion, I don't think it's the best thing for Conor, but it's something that's going to get the attention off of all of these crazy allegations, crazy lawsuits, crazy, trials that he's been on, all this stuff, man. A good way to dip his toe back into the fight world, with an actual fight, instead of just talking shit, instead of parading around like a circus animal in BKFC, instead of just acting like a fighter but never really showing it. That's kind of what he's been up to for the past few years. And now maybe he's really gonna fight, and they're talking in April. So if we think about it, he has a few months to train legitimately and then fight in April, and then it'll probably take a few months to recover from any kind of injury, any kind of happenings from the fight, and then maybe come back to the UFC. But he's contracted with the UFC. He still has 2 fights on his contract. They're gonna allow this to happen, and people wonder why. It's because Logan Paul is part of the WWE. He's a champion over there apparently right now, or was. I don't keep up with wrestling, but I mean, regardless, he's in that company. He's in the WWE. Now, WWE is under the same umbrella of, overall companies with the UFC, and that is, I just spaced the name. Either way, these 2 companies work hand in hand, side by side. So it's easier for them to make a contract. It's easier for the UFC to allow one of their fighters to fight with somebody that wrestles in that company. So people were like, nah, Dana White's never gonna let this happen. Yeah, that might be true when it comes to Jake Paul, but not Logan Paul, because it's a hell of a lot easier to make it happen. So why not? And that's why I think that this is probably gonna happen. We're gonna see this fight in April or somewhere around that, and then we might not see Conor in the UFC until later in the year. And that would mean that he would get 1 fight out of the way later this year, and then still have 1 more fight left on his contract, unless for some reason the UFC makes enough money off this deal to fight Logan Paul that they consider that a fight off of his contract. Maybe they're doing a trade. Who knows? Either way, McGregor's talked about going and actually fighting in the BKFC, where he is a part owner in, and he's talked about doing a bunch of other shit. So sounds like he wants out of the UFC after he gets maybe 1 or 2 more fights in, depending on how the contract negotiations go. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that and see when we get a full official confirmation for this McGregor versus Logan Paul fight. Boxing match, that is. It is not going to be an MMA fight. Neither of the Paul brothers have done MMA yet, and I'm assuming if anybody does, it's going to be Jake, but that's yet to be seen as well. So I'll be on the lookout for it. Regardless of anything, I cover it because it has to do with everything that I talk about, which is boxing, combat sports, MMA, because he's fought a bunch of former MMA fighters, and Logan Paul has boxed multiple times. So yeah, sorry if you don't like it, but it's something to cover, and it's something to talk about, because this is gonna be a big thing if it happens and it comes through. So it is what it is. I know people like that saying. Let's move on to something else, back to MMA, and we'll talk real quick about the Global Fight League, which I covered in my last full show. And this is a new organization that's popping up for MMA. They're called the Global Fight League, the GFL, and they seem to be picking up anybody that the UFC doesn't have already, anybody that's not contracted with any other MMA organization. They're picking up tons of ex-UFC fighters that have either retired or got released or fought out their contract in the UFC. People like Tyron Woodley, Vanderlei Silva, who is been retired for how long, and he's coming back. It's crazy. they're going to be fighting in like a team kind of thing. And no, I'm not talking about the teams as in 3-on-3 or 5-on-5 in the cage, but they're going to be consisting of teams. It's a structured thing where it's kind of like the PFL, where they're going to do seasons and rank, you know, they're gonna do like a tournament style thing where there's playoffs and championships and all that shit. So go back to my last full episode. I think it's episode 134, where I talked everything about GFL and went through a lot of the fighters. But there were some new fighters that have signed on, including the most notable, Paige Van Zandt is coming back to MMA after fighting in bare knuckle fighting. She did slap fighting, if you want to call that fighting. But yeah, she fought a couple bare knuckle fights, and she's been in a couple of slap fights. So now she's making her way back into MMA, you know, possibly thinking that she might make her way back to the UFC. Who knows? But she has stated on her podcast that she is looking to have big fights and make a lot of money in the short period of time that she has left, to be able to fight healthy and be able to fight in a manner that makes sense for her. So that means big fights, that means super fights, whatever you want to call it. But with this new MMA organization that seems to be offering fighters quite a bit of money, and that's something that they have trouble finding in other organizations, especially with the kind of structure that they have and everything like that. These guys are, Tyron Woodley says he's set to make a lot of money fighting in this organization. So I guess we'll see. Haven't heard a whole lot about it past that, but they're trying to get it together and get it going. And this month they're having a draft for the teams, kind of football style, and they're going to be drafting their fighters to the teams. I think there's like going to be like 5 teams, but they have all divisions, and their divisions are kind of a step up of what the UFC has. So the UFC's lightweight division is 155. I think theirs is going to be like 165 or 170, something like that. It's a little bit different, but that's because they're trying to do things differently to make things better, and maybe account for and make up for the things that people don't like in the other organizations. I'm not sure, but that's the plan. They're supposed to be announcing teams soon and what cities they're going to be from. I guess these fighters can fight and train in any city they want, but they're fighting for the city that they get drafted to. So whatever that means, I guess we'll find out more as the time comes closer to actually having this organization start up. But if you go to what is it, MMAGFL.com, you can read a lot more about it. They do a breakdown. It just says GFL is revolutionizing combat sports with a global team-based league that shares 50% of event revenue with athletes. That's a notable thing right there, and prioritizes their health, which is why the weight classes are different, wellness, and retirement, because they're offering them like retirement plans and stuff. So this groundbreaking league unites fans and athletes, creating MMA's most passionate community. So yeah, I mean, 50 athletes are draft eligible. The future of combat sports starts here, and they list all the fighters. They haven't updated it yet. It says 21 days, 4 hours and 31 minutes until greatness begins, it says. So yeah, you can sign up and be notified when they're doing the draft. The structure is going to be road to the championship type stuff, regular season with all the 6 cities, so 6 teams. There'll be a semifinals, a finals, and then that'll give you your champion overall. It says regular season starts April of 2025, so we got a ways away, a few months, but you know, we get the draft this month, and we'll see how it's going to look after that, I guess, and see what fighters are going to be where and what teams they're going to be on. They are doing a point system, kind of like PFL, but they get 4 points for a finish win, 3 points for a decision win, 2 points for a draw, 1 point for a decision loss, and 0 points for a finish loss. So basically you get a point no matter what, unless you get submitted or knocked out. So there you go. And then the points contribute to the team's total score. Like I said, they get the 50-50 revenue share, comprehensive support, access to training resources, medical assistance, promotional support to enhance their careers, retirement benefits, global exposure, insurance coverage, which isn't offered in other organizations, and athlete-centric model, a league designed to prioritize athlete well-being, safety, and career development. So it sounds like they're trying to make these fighters better, as well as profit off of them fighting. Obviously, that's what organization's going to do, and give fighters an outlet, an alternative outlet to what's out there right now. Because right now we really just have PFL and the UFC. The UFC being number one, PFL that is now merged with Bellator as the number 2 spot, and then one championship is still out there, but there's been a lot of negative press around them and with the athletes and their contracts and all that stuff. So it's not looking great for them. There's been a lot of a mass exodus of sorts with some of their bigger name fighters, including some of their just grapplers that they have there. You know, they do jiu-jitsu matches and stuff, and Mikey Musumeci being the face of their jiu-jitsu / grappling kind of not leagues, but divisions in that organization. And he up and left due to kind of contract disputes and stuff like that. And there's a lot of guys that are not happy with how many the fights that they get and how many they get a year and stuff. Same thing's kind of happening in PFL though, because Bellator fighters that have moved over there have also not been getting a lot of fights. Their contracts haven't been honored yet. So maybe this year will bring something different for the PFL, and they'll phase out that Bellator name and really get those fighters going. But that's yet to be seen. So stick around and find out, because I'll be covering all of it, of course. But as for that, let's move on to the meat of the show and talk about the UFC, because the UFC is at this point the worldwide leader in MMA. And of course, they're the biggest name in the sport. You know, now if you're a newbie here, I know you may have heard people say they do UFC, or do you do UFC? No, you fight in MMA. UFC is just an organization that they might belong to or fight for, but that doesn't mean that doesn't encompass the entire sport. So you got to remember that if you want to talk to people about it, because otherwise you might sound a little silly. I don't fault you for it, because it is tough to distinguish the difference between MMA and UFC if you don't follow it, because MMA has always been revolved around the UFC, because they've made their biggest name for themselves and become the most mainstream and popular league and organization out there. So I don't blame you. But yeah, right now, leaving 2024 and coming into 2025, we have the current champions for the men's divisions. As you can see on the screen, you got the heavyweight division has 2 champs right now, a regular champion and an interim champion, and that's because Jon Jones, being the heavyweight champion of the world right now, disputed at the moment because there is an interim champion, but he got injured. So in the meantime, Tom Aspinall went ahead and fought for the interim championship, and he won. And because Jon Jones got injured when he was set to fight Stipe Miocic, they had to reschedule that fight, obviously. While a lot of people thought, hey, Tom Aspinall should be fighting now to unify the belt, that contract was already in place. You know, Stipe's trying to retire. You know, he wanted to see what would happen and with his last fight and all that. So the UFC made it happen, which is fine, because Stipe is such a legend and did so much in his career and was such a great champ that, you know, he deserves to get that last fight against a big name and make a lot of money and possibly go out with a belt around his shoulder, around his waist, whatever you want to say. So he did that, and the UFC did it for him. And unfortunately, he fell short, but he did retire. So he's one of the many that retired in the UFC for 2024. But, you know, with Jon Jones, he showed and proved why he is a great champion of any of the divisions he's been in. Light heavyweight for the longest of times, and now heavyweight. He beat Cyril Gane to become the champ, and then he fought Stipe. So he's got 2 fights in the heavyweight division and is the current actual champ, with Tom Aspinall being the interim champion. And then we move to light heavyweight, someone who's been rumored to possibly go up to the heavyweight division and fight for yet a third title in a third weight class. Those are just rumors and speculations at the moment, but that's definitely been talked about. So Alex Pereira, if you don't know him, I don't know where you've been. You may not know the name, but look at the face, and I'm sure you've seen his walkout or his knockouts or his celebrations. Who knows? You might have seen one or all of those, but he's probably one of the biggest stars in UFC right now, if not the biggest star in UFC right now. And that's good for the UFC, because in 2024 they were lacking in the superstar category, because they didn't really have anybody that was a superstar. I mean, walking into 2024, we had, of course, Conor still signed, but he was supposed to have fought after the Ultimate Fighter and didn't fight all of 2024, even though the rumors were going around as to when he was supposed to. He was scheduled to, and it got pushed back and got, canceled and everything else. So waited 2 years for him to fight and still didn't fight, but he got injured as well, so I guess we can't hold that against him. But Sean O'Malley was probably the biggest star going into 2024, and now going into 2025 we have John Jones back and active, which is always a big thing for the organization. We have Alex Pereira just rose and became a superstar because he is super popular. It's weird because he doesn't even speak English, and he is beloved. And a lot of it has to do with his demeanor. He's very stoic, but when you see him laugh and smile and talk freely, it's, I don't know, people like it. And he's impressive as hell in that cage. So even though he suffered a loss to Israel Adesanya when he got knocked out, he also beat Izzy to become the champ. He came back and got the belt back, he went up and got the belt in the light heavyweight division. So that makes him a 2-division champion. He's one of the few, and now he's talking about possibly even going up to a third weight class and become the first 3-division champion. So that's yet to be seen as well, but 2025 might be the year. Who knows? He fought 3 times last year. He saved a lot of events because they needed the big name at the top. They needed the title fight at the top, and even though he was injured and didn't have a lot of time to rest between fights, he still came out, did the damn thing, and put on a show and saved the card. So that's why Alex Pereira is definitely one of the best athletes, if not the best one in the UFC right now, as far as popularity and being active too, man, and strength of schedule. I mean, he hasn't been fighting cans. He's been fighting title fights, 5-round title fights, and he did it 3 times this year. It's pretty impressive. So that moves us down to the middleweight division with Dricus du Plessis. And he came in the champ after beating Israel Adesanya, actually beating Sean Strickland first and then beating Israel Adesanya. So he's gotten some big names under his belt as well. He beat Robert Whittaker previously, looking impressive. Before that, he was having issues with his cardio, but he had a nose issue. He got that fixed and came back looking better than ever, and now he's a champ. So middleweight champion for 2024 going into 25 is Dricus du Plessis. For the welterweight, we had a change of belts, a change of hands with the belt, I should say, and Belal Muhammad is coming into 2025 as the welterweight champion of the UFC, taking that title away from Leon Edwards, who walked into 2024 as the champ after a couple title defenses and that big head kick knockout over I keep spacing names and stuff at the very end of what I'm saying, but why am I doing this? I can't remember his name. Holy shit. Anyway, I can find out real quick because that's gonna bug the hell out of me that I just totally messed that up. Leon Edwards, damn it. No, Leon Edwards versus, damn it, not Usman, Kamaru Usman. That's who I'm looking for. So Leon beat Kamaru to become the champ, stayed the champ, had a couple defenses, and then fights Belal Muhammad, who a lot of people were like, there's no fucking way Belal beats Leon. Belal it took him so long to get a title fight as it was, much less become the champ. And yeah, after a long wait, he finally got the title shot, and he was impressive in that title shot. He shut Leon Edwards down. Leon did what he did in the Usman fight, which we hadn't seen him do since then. And instead of coming out in the 5th round after getting a great pep talk from his corner, he just couldn't put it together like he did in that fight against Usman. So he lost the title. And that takes us over to the lightweight division with Islam Makhachev walking in as the champ and walking out as the champ again. Fighting some big fights against Dustin Poirier and a few other big names. Yeah, we're gonna go over all of that actually here shortly. So Islam Makhachev looking like a tough opponent to beat, but I think there's a possibility he loses that belt this year. But I guess we'll see. Ilia Topuria taking over the featherweight championship from Alexander Volkanovski, which was a fucking heartbreaker because a lot of people love Volk, man. And his personality and his demeanor is just something that people just gravitate towards, and he's a great fighter. So he comes in and just does not look like himself against Ilia and gets knocked out, man, and it was tough to watch. But even worse, Ilia Topuria fights Max Holloway in his last fight in 2024 and knocks out Max Holloway too, someone who's never been knocked down, much less knocked out in a fight. And that was a bigger heartbreak. I was sad as fuck to see that, especially after the performance that Max Holloway had in UFC 300 with that crazy ass last second knockout over Justin Gaethje after pointing in the center of the cage like he does. The only one that can do it and do it correctly and mean it and put something behind it is Max Holloway, pointing to the ground, meeting in the center of the cage and going blow for blow, all out battle. And Max Holloway came out on top against Justin Gaethje, but couldn't do it against Topuria to win the belt, which is unfortunate. But Max is definitely in the mix to make his way back up to get another title shot, hopefully, regardless of how many he's had in the past. Because he was in the bantamweight division bantamweight division before. No, not bantamweight. Where was he? Oh, he was no, he was in the featherweight. That's right. He moved up to lightweight to fight Gaethje. So yeah, he was the featherweight champ in the past. Has had a bunch of title shots in the featherweight division. Maybe he moves up to lightweight this year and maybe makes his way to the title there. Who knows? But never count Max out. So we got another change of hands with the title at bantamweight division. Merab Dvalishvili coming into 2025 as the current champion of the bantamweight division, and he beat Sugar Sean O'Malley for that title at Noche UFC or UFC Noche, which happened at the Sphere, one of the biggest events, the biggest event that happened this year as far as all of the media coverage and everything else, the spectacle that it was. The Sphere is a crazy thing in Las Vegas. The outside, the inside, everything is impressive and mesmerizing and hypnotic. If you saw anything coming from Las Vegas for New Year's Eve, it was the Sphere, and all the craziness that happened there with the DJ playing and all the graphics and crazy shit. It's insane, and they have some crazy shows that happen there. Now we've had the first event to happen, like combat sports event, which was the UFC this year. And we'll talk about that one again, of course, a little bit later in the show. But yeah, Merab comes out after a long winning streak and finally gets his title shot and wins. So he beat a lot of good guys on the way there, and Sugar Sean is, I'm sure, going to be back and stronger than ever. But as of right now, he's not the champ. Merab took that over and is going to be fighting coming up actually on the 18th against Usman Nurmagomedov. So, right? Is that who he's fighting? Why does that not sound right? But I got to double check that, because that's going to be one of those things again that messes with my head, because I feel like I'm wrong for some reason. But I'm gonna check that and be 100% sure. UFC 311. Yeah. Oh, Umar Nurmagomedov. Usman Nurmagomedov. That's why it sounded wrong. Umar Nurmagomedov is in the UFC. Usman was in Bellator, now PFL. That's what it is. Nurmagomedovs, man. They fight similar. They sound similar. Names, everything. So, and they're all dominating. Umar is 18-0. Merab is 18-4. But yeah, Umar gets his title shot there. So along with him, Islam, who I just mentioned too, fighting Arman Tsarukyan for the lightweight championship coming up on the 18th for UFC 311. Should be a good card because also we got Yuri Prohaska versus Jamal Hill, Beneil Dariush versus Hinato Moicano, and Kevin Holland versus Rainier de Ritter. That should be a pretty damn good main card. Some decent fights in the undercard as well. Johnny Walker versus Bogdan Guskov, who you'll see coming up here in a few, in a couple different events that he had some notable wins. The undefeated Peyton Talbot versus Hani Borsalos, Jalton Almeida versus Sergey Spivak, and Zachary Reese versus Cedric Dumas. So yeah, some good names even in the early prelims. Holy shit. Grant Dawson versus Diego Fajeda, Ricky Tercios versus Bernardo Sopal. Yeah, some good fights down there too. So UFC 311 coming up on the 18th of January. Can't wait for that. Watch Party podcast happening that night. So make sure you watch out for that promo and be ready for the watch party. So rounding out the men's division, we got the flyweight champion coming in as he left 2024. What night? It's January 18th, Infinity. It's a Saturday. But flyweight champion Alexandre Pantoja, kept his title, and yeah, that's really it. He got into a couple pretty good fights, ushering in a UFC debut for Kai Asakura, who was a big name outside of the UFC in Ryzen, and he's a pretty impressive fighter and a champion over in Ryzen. So yeah, he made his debut in the last UFC pay-per-view of the year against Alexandre Pantoja. Gave Pantoja a pretty good fight, but Pantoja comes out on top with the win. Used some of Asakura's weapons against him with those big knees to the body, and was able to make the win happen. So he kept his belt. And that brings us over to the women's champs, which is a far smaller list because there used to be 4 divisions in the UFC, and now there's really only 3. And that's because the featherweight division kind of went away when Cyborg and Amanda Nunes and everybody else is gone. Nunes was the champion in the featherweight division, and then she retired. So but as of right now, the bantamweight division, Juliana Pena is the current champion, taking that belt away from Amanda Nunes. Oh, I'm sorry, Raquel Pennington. I just said Nunes. That's why she wants to fight Nunes again because she's beat her in the past. But Juliana Pena is the current bantamweight champion after beating Raquel Pennington for the title. We had Kayla Harrison making her way into the bantamweight division this year, coming over from PFL, and she was pretty dominant over there. Got her one and only loss in the PFL. Didn't fight for a while, and then turned around and signs up with the UFC, and has a decent first fight against Holly Holm. Fought again against Ketlin Vieira, where she got challenged a bit in that fight and didn't look the best, but still came out on top with the win. So she's 2-0 in the UFC, and I'm assuming she's trying to get way better and come back and make a run for that belt. And I feel like with the shortness of big names in that division, I'm pretty sure she's about a fight away, if not her next fight being for the title. In the women's flyweight division, we have Valentina Shevchenko regaining her title after losing it to Alexa Grasso, and then coming to a draw with her in a second fight, and then they fight a third time at the Sphere for Noche UFC. And she beats Grasso for that title in what was not the best fight in the world, but she definitely came out on top. There's really no doubt about that one. So, and then we have in the strawweight division, Zhang Weili or Weili Zhang, whichever way you want to say it. Sounds better to me, Weili Zhang, but I'll Maybe it's actually Zhang Weili. Who knows? That's how these foreign names go. But she continues to be the strawweight champ as she was when we started 2024. After she had a pretty crazy fight with Yan Xiaonan, where it looked like she had a chance of losing that one, but came out on top and got the win. I think she only fought once in 2024. I believe that's correct. Yes. So that one and only fight, she retains the title, and I'm sure we'll be seeing something from her coming up soon. And that's it for the women's champions going into 2025. And that brings us over to the fight nights of 2024. Let me tell you something about this graphic. This shit was hard to make. That's what I gotta say. I put this all together. Maybe you've seen one somewhere. Maybe you've seen something like it somewhere. I didn't find one that was pre-made anywhere with all the posters from the fight nights of every single event for a fight night in 2024. So I sought them out, and I downloaded all of them and put them all into a graphic, and here it is. There's a lot of work for a very short period of time showing it, but that's okay. It's also on the thumbnail, so it lives there. I don't care. But prep work, man, it's a beast. But hey, I like the way it came out. These are all the posters from the fight nights. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about with all of them, and I couldn't go over everything. Ankalaev versus Walker was the first fight of the year. Nothing too crazy there, but you know, it was like their second fight against each other, and Ankalaev came out with the win there. Dolidze Imamov, Moreno Royval 2, that was a war. Hermanson versus Pfeiffer. There's good fights in the undercards of all these fights, and that's what I was going to talk about more than anything, because a lot of these main events in a lot of these fight nights didn't come through very well. But you know, there's always the supporting cast that is down there entertaining for everybody, even though the main event may not come through as being great. But yeah, I mean, from what I remember, you know, we had couple headlines, women headline fights. Hebus versus Namajunas, Blanchfield versus Furo. Those are some big fights. Let's see, Lewis versus Nascimento, the big boys at heavyweight fighting there. Man, some of these were very forgettable. I think there were some good fights in that. Perez versus Tyra. Namajunas versus Cortez. Funny thing about that one was Namajunas fucking knocking off Tracy Cortez's fake eyelash in the middle of the fight. That was some crazy shit. Whitaker versus Aliskerov. Whitaker looking great in that fight. Lemos versus Jandiroba. Oh man, that was probably one of the worst ones. Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov. That was a great fight, with Nurmagomedov coming out on top. That was his fight that probably got him the title fight coming up here. Tybura versus Spivak. Some pretty decent fights coming out of that one. Cannonier, Borralio. That was good. Burns versus Brady was a banger, because fucking Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady are just brawlers. And I mean, Burns has fights a little more technical sometimes, but man, that was a good fight. Moicano versus Saint Denis was a good one. Royval versus Tyra, pretty good. Hernandez versus Michelle Pereira. Actually, that was a good fight too, because I thought Pereira was going to come out and dominate over Hernandez, and if I remember correctly, that is not what happened. So let me see here. Performance of the night stuff. I should have been reading those. Maybe, I'm sorry, did I have that backwards? I think, no, hold on. Whitaker, Aliskerov. Where am I? I'm missing. Here we go. Cannonier, Borralio, Michael Morales, Wayne Kong, and Gerald Mearshart. Yeah, I should look at these to remember exactly what happened, because that's kind of a good indication. What am I looking for? Hernandez. Yeah, Anthony Hernandez. Yeah, he came out with that win. Okay, I was right about that. Moreno versus El Bazi. there was 4 performance of the nights. Jazz Davicius with a good submission. Charles Jourdain submission as well. Stoltzfus. I think this was the night of submissions in this Moreno versus Albazi card. Magny versus Protest. That was a great fight. Carlos Protest just impressive fight against Neil Magny, who is somewhat of a gatekeeper. And yeah, Protest showed him what he was about. Mansour Abdul Malik, Charles Radke, and Damon Blakeshear getting performance bonuses there. Yan versus Figueiredo. That one was a decent card, and that was Selikov, Zhang Miang, Gabriela Fernandez, and He Ming. Oh, that was the card where the Road to the UFC, the China edition, had their finale there, and Shi Ming got that nasty, crazy, big head kick knockout from this really tiny strawweight girl, who is apparently exactly Tommy China. That's what played in my head when I said that. But yeah, she's a doctor, but yet a fighter. Her parents didn't know she was a fighter, and she comes out winning this tournament and gets a UFC contract after that big head kick knockout. So that was kind of crazy. And then you had the last event of the year, Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley, and Joaquin Buckley bloodied the face of that stupid little bitch, Colby Covington. And Covington had to bow out of the fight because the doctor wouldn't let him continue, and I'm pretty sure he was happy about that. He got a pretty nasty gash on his eyelid, right above his eyelid, and the doctor was worried that if it got any bigger, that maybe that would be something that could cause him to lose his eyelid. So they stopped the fight. Joaquin Buckley looked impressive. Colby Covington looked like the little bitch that he is, and I was happy at the end of that one. Michael Johnson with a big knockout. Dustin Jacoby with a big knockout. Fight of the night was Cub Swanson versus Billy Quarantillo. Cub Swanson with a nasty knockout of Billy Q, which was awesome to see. Because of Cub, not because of Billy Q. I like Billy Q. I was not wishing for him to get knocked out, but it was a crazy knockout coming from Cub, an old school veteran. So yeah, that was just some of the, fight nights and things to remember from those. I'm gonna get into the pay-per-views here and go a little deeper with those. And here's your pay-per-views, all put together as one. All the posters from the pay-per-views. This one obviously not as difficult as the other one was because there's a lot less, but let's see, overall, what happened here? I think overall for fight nights, if I can get this to scroll all the way up, there we go. Total events, there was 42 total events this year, or in 2024. There was 517 total fights and 19 title fights, which is crazy. Spanning from January 13th to December 14th. And yeah, I think there was 28 fight nights and what is this? 3, 4, 5, 5, 10, 14 pay-per-views throughout the entire year of 2024. So, I mean, it's pretty typical. That's pretty much around the same number as usual. But, the other things they did was the new gloves that they, brought in June seemed to have maybe fucked up the knockout rates for the rest of the year, because we had a lot of decisions. I think I read a stat that said 55% of the fights ended in a decision result for the year of 2024. I was like, wow, because we all know those decision fights are not always the best, not always the funnest to watch, unless it's a real technical battle or a chess match of sorts. When it goes to decision, you're just, the first thing you think of was that might have been boring. Now we're all here to watch the fights regardless, and we're all here to watch the fights all the way through. But when you have a full, almost an entire card, if not an entire main card of nothing but decisions, not the best for viewership. So the UFC is big enough to overcome stuff like that, but really, it drops the interest a little bit. So in December for that John Jones fight, they dropped the new gloves because they were supposedly a little bit lighter, but they had padding in different areas, and I think that caused the drop in percentages for knockouts. It seemed like that's what everyone's narrative kind of was with the new gloves. Either way, it sounded like people were not happy with them, so they scrapped them, and kind of hoping that they keep it that way, because as much as I would love for gloves to be better, they need to be better in a good way. Well, that's what better means. Be better. Don't change them and have them be shit still in different ways. Change them to be better in the ways they need it, and keep the good shit about them. You know, that's what we need. So if you're going to change the equipment, change it for the better, not just because you want to say there's a change. And the colors were whack. Like the gold was shitty. They should have done a black with a gold trim instead of a gold with a black trim. The gold just looked generic. As you can see in that UFC 300 poster, looks generic. The gold, we get it. It stands for fucking a champion, being a champion, the title, having the belt, all that shit. The champs wear black and gold. I get it. But the gold is not a very appealing color. You can't get that gold visually that you do when you see it on a belt. Let's leave all the gold for the belt and everything else that we're used to. The gold for gloves, not great. They didn't look good at all. They look very cheap. We saw graphics being rubbed off of them easily, and it was a bust. So we should leave that in 2024 and not bring it back for 25. But other than that, oh, TKO is the I don't know why I just remembered it. TKO is the organization that both the WWE and the UFC are under now. So that's one of the things I remembered finally. There was a couple new rules that changed, or a couple new rules, or a couple rules that changed and were new for 2024, which was the 12-6 elbow is no longer a thing. They can do that now. And then the grounded opponent now needs to have like 3 points of contact, or no, not three. What is it? You can't just have fingers on the ground now. You kind of have to have like a knee down, basically, to become a grounded opponent. You can't play that game anymore of just touching a fingertip and saying that's an illegal strike because my fingers were down. So those things changed this year. Seems to be for the better. No big impact from the time it was changed in November to now. So it took place. First event was in Edmonton, Alberta, for the Moreno versus Albazi fight on November 2nd. So it's only a couple months in. Not too many events have happened since then. So that might be something we see a bigger impact on the sport this year, since we'll have begun the year with those new rule changes in effect already. So yeah, and then the only other thing that really happened was they took cannabis away, because they went away from USADA, and now they're using drug-free sport organizations for their anti-doping. And I guess they're big in a lot of the other leagues, like the MLB and the NBA and stuff like that. So and now the commissions have dropped cannabis from being on their ban list. So now the possession, use, or consumption of cannabis or cannabis products will not be considered an anti-doping violation. So I'm assuming you can't go into the cage high, but you're not going to get a 5-year ban like Nick Diaz got for dropping dirty. So that's good, especially since it's legal in the biggest state for combat sports, Nevada, and everywhere else now. So anyway, let's get into recapping some of these pay-per-view events, starting with 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis, fighting for that welterweight championship, or I'm sorry, middleweight championship. Sean Strickland was the previous champ going into this, and Dricus du Plessis walked out becoming the champ. We also had Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Buenos Silva. Buenos Silva was coming off of a suspension for a banned substance and still got her title fight against Raquel Pennington, but Raquel Pennington came out on top with that one. So there's a couple highlights Jillian Robertson and I think that's Jasmine Jasdavicius. I gotta get my stuff that I slacked on apparently. Yeah, we had Jillian Robertson versus Polyana Viana, getting a performance bonus there. Robertson comes out with the TKO, and then we had Jasmine Jasdavicius with the Darce choke there for that submission, getting the performance of the night over Priscilla Cachueta. So for the men for the 297 event, Neil Magny with a big win over Mike Malott, which underdog win there because holy shit, no one thought that Neil Magny was gonna win over Mike Malott, who was on a crazy streak. And yeah, Neil Magny gets the TKO win for that one. And then Drake is coming out with the big win over Sean Strickland. And even though I'm not a huge fan of DDP, it does make me feel some kind of good watching him punch Sean Strickland in the mouth like that. Because Sean Strickland is another guy I do not like the most out of all the fighters. So next up, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. Yet again, another title fight that came out different than it went in, with Topuria beating Volkanovski for the title in the bantamweight division. I'm sorry, the featherweight division. So Topuria wins the belt there, gets the performance of the night, big KO by right hook over Volkanovski, which I mentioned earlier, sad to see. We had this weird Amanda Lemos versus Mackenzie Dern fight where Mackenzie Dern heard the announcement of Lemos winning, but yet started celebrating as if she won, which was weird. Makes you wonder if maybe she got a little banged up. You can see her face is a little banged up and bloody there. So yeah, that was a weird one, but that happened. And then we had Ming Yang Zhang versus Breton Hibero. Zhang coming out of that with a TKO win in the first round, and that was a big win for him. He got a performance of the night bonus there. And then again, Topuria over Volk with that nasty big right hand. We also had Hernandez, Anthony Hernandez over Roman Kopylov with his rear naked choke submission in the second round, which was a pretty good fight. And watching Hernandez get sink in that choke was pretty crazy too. It was a good fight there for, you know, the middle of the main card basically. Next up, UFC 299. And the lead up to these fights there was a lot of stuff going around leading up to 300 because of, you know, the fight card, who was gonna fight. But we had all these good fights in the first three cards of the year. Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera 2, which, if you remember anything about the first fight, Chito Vera beat Sean O'Malley because O'Malley had that injury with his ankle or his calf or some shit like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he had an issue with his foot, leg area, and he, to this day, still doesn't say that he lost that fight because he said he was beating the shit out of Vera until that happened with his leg. So yeah, but we also had that banger of a fight with Poirier versus Saint Denis where everyone was counting Poirier out because Saint Denis looked like such a fucking beast. But instead we get Poirier knocking out Saint Denis and kind of changing the course of Saint Denis' career for the year, because I mean, he was coming in there, like I said, looking like a beast, looking unbeatable, and winds up getting knocked out by Poirier, which is no joke. It's not like Poirier, you know, couldn't do it or something like that. It's just people were thinking, okay, Poirier's kind of 1 foot out now, and he's fighting this killer in Saint Denis. But Saint Denis has never fought anybody like Poirier, so regardless of how good he's looked in his previous fights, that shit happened, and it was a crazy one to watch. So looking at some of the fights from that card, we had Rubelas de Spain that came in and then quickly exited the UFC, but he was impressive in his first fight here against Josh Parisian. He got the performance of the night bonus with this counter right TKO of Parisian, and that was a big win for him in his debut for the UFC. But he did not look good after that, and now he has been released by the UFC and has signed with Global Fight League. So the GFL will see some disdain. I guess he fought in Karate Combat as well and got like a 42-second knockout or some shit like that. It was pretty crazy. So maybe he just needed some more fights before getting into the UFC. So we'll see if we see a comeback from him into the UFC, unless they're just over it. But we also had Michelle Pineda versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Pretty fun fight there. Round 1 minute into the first round, submission by rear naked choke, with Pineda becoming the winner there and getting the performance of the night bonus. Chimaev superfan, is Umar out? Seeing a lot of people speculating online since the UFC took his interview down. No, you know what? I haven't seen a whole lot from that. So I thought I heard a little bit of something from that here or there, but I thought I heard something about the interview being taken down because of something that he said, I think. So you never know, because you know the UFC usually just lets him go, but if there's a lot of repercussions or heat coming from something someone says, a lot of times they'll maybe sneak one of those out of the archive there, but I'm not sure. But hey, thanks for that heads up, because I haven't really heard much about him being out of the fight. But you never know with these guys, man. You get a lot of injuries and shit like that. They train hard and they're savage, so things happen. I wouldn't be surprised. So moving to the next, we had let me catch up here. Curtis Blades versus Gelton Almeida. Curtis Blades with the hammer fist TKO of Gelton Almeida in the second round. Performance and a night bonus for him there. JDM, Jack Della Maddalena, over Gilbert Burns. That was man, that was tough to watch. Gilbert didn't look like himself really in that fight, or Jack's just that damn good. But with this knee to the head there was impressive, and he gets the knee to ground strikes and gets the TKO in the third round over Gilbert Burns. This was the starting of that sequence, and that moves us into the last fights. Like I talked about earlier, we had that big Poirier versus Saint Denis fight. 232 in the second round. Big right hook from Poirier, as you see there, knocking out Saint Denis. Impressive as hell. Fun to watch. Nothing against Saint Denis. It's just, damn, watching Poirier do his thing, hiking up those shorts and fucking throwing down. It's one of the best things you can watch in MMA right now. So if you haven't seen it, go check out Dustin Poirier's previous fights, mostly his wins, and watch him hike those shorts up and then whoop some ass. Then you had Sugar Sean O'Malley fully and legitimately beating Chito Vera in their fight here early in the year. For Sugar Sean as another defense. And Chito didn't look himself in this fight at all, so it was tough to, give Sean full credit, but Sean looked really good. He did his thing, and he finished the fight like he should have. So the speculation's only what the hell was wrong with Chito, because he just looked bad. Either way, got to give all the credit to Sugar anyway, for this title defense. And then the big UFC 300 that everybody was waiting on, that everybody was talking about, maybe McGregor, maybe not McGregor. What other big names are we going to get for this fight? The talk over and over and over again for the year leading up to this, basically, there was constant speculation and, constantly wondering what was going to happen. I believe this was the fight that was supposed to be John Jones versus Stipe, and then John Jones gets injured. Maybe it wasn't this one. That might have been one of the rumors that it was going to be. There was just so much talked about with this fight that it was tough to keep up and tough to remember everything. So, but yeah, it happened regardless. And we had the big, let's see, canceled. Oh, it was supposed to be Leon versus Bilal. That's right. I forgot about that. That was supposed to be the main event. And this is one of the fights that Alex Pereira saved this card, because they were counting on something big, and with that title fight being out, You know, somebody had to step up, and Pineda did what he does best. Came out in impressive fashion. You know, we had all the crazy stuff going on around UFC 300, but the biggest thing, hey, thanks Infinity, appreciate you. Talk to you soon. But what was I saying? Yeah, the card was crazy. You start off with two former champions in the UFC, Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, and man, in the bantamweight division, Figueiredo coming up from the flyweight division, and Cody having gone down, I think, because I think he was in the bantamweight division before. Oh, I'm sorry, the featherweight. No, maybe he was always a bantamweight. Anyway, both of them former champs. Figueiredo comes out with a big submission win over Cody Garbrandt. You had Bobby Green versus Jim Miller, or King Green now. Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez, Renato Moicano versus Jalen Turner. I mean, so just name after name after name. Diego Lopez versus Sadiq Youssef. TKO by uppercuts for Diego Lopez in that win. Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm. This was Kayla Harrison's debut in the UFC. Getting a big submission win over Holly Holm by rear naked choke. Aljamain Sterling, former champ, versus Calvin Kattar. Sterling gets a big win over Kattar there. Looked impressive even though it was a decision. Yuri Prohaska, as you see in this picture here below, versus Alexander Rakic. And yeah, Yuri looking impressive in this one. In the second round, gets a TKO by ground and pound. Looking like the Yuri of old. Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. Bo Nickel gets a submission by rear naked choke. And that was still the prelims. Oh no, that was the first main card fight there. Bo Nickel. Armin Tsarukyan versus Charles Oliveira in a hell of a fight. It was a split decision win for Tsarukyan, but that was a great fight. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, of course. Where am I at here? There we go. Max Holloway with that nasty KO in the middle of the cage, going toe to toe with Justin Gaethje. You cannot beat that picture. I just bought my daughter Trend the shirt of Holloway flexing, screaming. It's a dope ass shirt because that was a badass reaction and celebration to that knockout. In the previous pictures, I forgot I had Weili Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan, the fight I talked about earlier. With Yan Xiaonan was out with one of the chokes that Weili Zhang put in at the end of like the second round, and I don't know how they let her continue. She got up looking like she just woke up from the longest nap ever after being drunk, and they still let her continue the fight, and she gets a unanimous decision win for Weili Zhang in that fight. And then, of course, the main event, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill making his comeback after being injured, and with that Achilles, which Infinity knows about the Achilles injury. He's gone, but yeah, and Alex Pereira, after getting what seemed like kicked in the nuts, or kicked in the cup, I should say, Herb Dean calls a stop, tries to pause and give him the time, and Pereira waves him back and says, no, I'm good. And then he proceeds to step on the foot of Jamal Hill and then come in with a big left hook and knock him out. So it was a pretty crazy sequence. And if you remember, the celebration was hilarious, doing the little but yeah, that was funny. Jamal Hill, of course, comes out and defends his performance and says that it wasn't fair how that went down, but it is what it is. Pereira defending his title, and yeah, just looking like the greatness that he is. So that was 300, supposed to be one of the biggest cards ever, because UFC 100 was probably the biggest out of the milestones. UFC 200 was pretty big. This one, the fight card, was impressive. I mean, like I said, all the people I went over throughout that card, crazy. We're not going to see another card like that, stacked to the brim like that, for a while. So for 300, it lived up to the hype in that manner, because it had something big happen throughout the fight, and had so many good fights. So definitely something to brag about there. Moving over to UFC 301, we had Pantoja versus Urseg. And I mean, Pantoja's just always involved in crazy wars. I feel like you always get an exciting fight from him. Well, maybe not always get an exciting fight, but you always get a fight that you're intrigued by. You're like, he's getting beat up. He's the champ, or he's getting beat up, and he's looking like he's not going to win. And next thing you know, he does. It's crazy. I think he's a little bit underrated, but I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Pantoja. I think he's a little bit weird, but you got to be to fight in this sport, I think. So, but we also had the return of Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez. Everyone was, kind of counting out Aldo, saying he's too old and he wasn't going to look good against somebody as young and active as Martinez. But Aldo came out and got the win in that one by unanimous decision. So there was a few fights to look at here with this card, and it starts with the first fight of the night, Alexandre Costa versus Kevin Borjas. Performance of the night for Costa with the TKO win by punches and ground and pound in the second round over Borjas, as you see in that top picture. And then you have Mauricio Rufy versus Jamie Malarkey in that bottom picture there. Performance of the night going to Rufy for a flying knee to punches with the TKO win over Jamie Malarkey. That was an exciting one. And then that brings us over to the main event. What did I do here? Damn it. Let me fix this real quick. There we go. Easy enough. Pantoja over Urseg in the win there. Like I said, Urseg was looking good. Made a big mistake, though, in the fifth round, going for a takedown that he just should not have gone for. I mean, if he would have stayed standing and put in a little more work to finish off that fifth round, I think he would have came away the champ because it was a close fight all the way through. But Pantoja took advantage of that just ridiculous sloppy takedown that Urseg threw in, probably being tired and everything else. But he jumped in like he shouldn't have, and Pantoja took advantage, capitalized on the last couple minutes of the round, and edges out that decision win over Steve Urseg for UFC 301. And that moves us into 302. Makhachev versus Poirier. Yet again, another fight that was like great and fun to watch, but man, you hated the outcome a bit because everyone was pulling for Dustin. What seemingly was probably his last title fight, either because he retires or because if he doesn't win this one, I don't see him getting many more title fights in that. So that one was a little bit tough to watch because we know the outcome. Makhachev won. But we also had Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Not a bad fight there, I guess, for the most part, but not the best either for the co-main in that one. Some other fights down on the card. We had, let me get to this here. Kevin Holland in that bottom picture versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. He gets that nasty armbar finish from Kevin Holland. Looking good in that fight. We had Jailton Almeida versus Alexander Romanov with a submission by rear naked choke in that top picture. And then that brings us to the main event here. Yeah, there we go. And we had the submission by Darce choke. Islam Makhachev putting in those chokes like he does so well against Dustin Poirier, getting his third title defense and fight of the night and performance of the night bonuses in that one. And again, watching Poirier lose like that sucks, but it's still fun to watch him fight, and we'll definitely be looking forward to his next one. And that moves us into UFC 303. Alex Pereira yet again fighting on somewhat of a shorter notice against Yuri Prohaska, the second fight of their career together. The first one being for that title. I think it was the title fight, right? But yeah, I mean, Pereira just stepping up and being the main event again. A couple months, away from the previous one that he just, fought in for UFC 300. So yeah, impressive stuff there from Pineda. That's why I consider him one of the biggest stars in the UFC right now, with all of the activity and all of the performances he put on throughout the year. You know, it's hard to deny. So we had some blood going on early on in this fight card with Mayra Buena Silva versus Macy Chiasson. That was a kind of a crazy fight because we had this nasty gash on the top of Mayra Buena Silva's eye, which got the fight stopped. So in the second round, they had to stop that fight, but Chiasson caused that with a big elbow. So that was a pretty interesting one there. And then moving on, we had Peyton Talbot and Yanis Gamure, but Peyton Talbot put in a pretty impressive performance for the 19 seconds into the first round. Quick TKO right cross to Gamure, and got the win there. And then we had this crazy fight with Andre Fili versus Cub Swanson, one of the most notable fights of the year, I think. Pretty fun to watch. Goes all the way, split decision win for Andre Touchy-Feely in this one. And that brings us to the main card with Joe Pyfer getting a big win versus Marc-Andre Barrio. Actually, that was still a prelim. Damn. That's right, because we had Michael Venom Page versus Ian Machado Gary on the main card, and Roman Dolidze versus Anthony Smith. Nothing crazy happening in those fights, but Joe Pyfer led us into the pay-per-view with the big KO win, overhand right, falling flat on his face. Marc-Andre Barrio gets knocked out by Joe Pyfer in impressive fashion. It was nice. And then you get Pineda versus Yuri Prohaska. 13 seconds into the second round, Pineda gets his big head kick TKO over Yuri Prohaska, gets the performance of the night bonus, and defends his belt for the second time. So that was UFC 303. Moving into 304. So we only have up to 310. So lock in for the last few here. But we had Edwards versus Muhammad. This is where Leon Edwards lost his title against Bilal Muhammad in London, I believe. And let's see, what is this, 304? Yeah. But yeah, so Leon just not looking good in his fight like he did against Usman. And man, it was a shitty performance by Leon Edwards. Didn't even look like he wanted to keep his belt at all, which was sad. But this was also where Tom Aspinall wins the interim championship. Wait, was this no, first consecutive interim defense? Oh yeah, this was his defense in the interim championship. Jesus, I forgot. So he's been an interim champ for a while, fighting Curtis Blades in this one. But let's see, moving in there, we had Mick Parkin versus Lucas Brzeski in a crazy fight that ended in the first round, TKO by punches. Parkin winning that fight in that top picture there. And then we got Paddy Pimblett versus King Green, Bobby Green, with the performance of the night bonus for Paddy Pimblett with that triangle choke submission here in round one over King Green. And then we got Tom Aspinall getting that interim championship title defense versus Curtis Blades. And then Bilal Muhammad beating Leon Edwards to get the welterweight championship to himself finally, after a long-awaited title, fight that he didn't get forever. And then he finally gets it and wins the title, which is pretty impressive for him. Moving on to 305, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. Long-awaited fight because they had some beef when Adesanya was still the champ, and then he lost to Strickland, and then Strickland lost to DDP, and now we have du Plessis versus Adesanya for UFC 305. And I was hoping that Adesanya came back and won the belt again, especially over DDP, just because I don't have anything particularly against DDP. It's just I'm a bigger Adesanya fan. Would have loved to have seen him get his belt back, but it didn't happen. And then we had Kai Kara France versus Steve Erceg as well in that one. Earlier on that card, well, there it is, Steve Erceg versus Kai Kara France in that bottom picture. And then you had Carlos Prates versus Li Jingliang in that one. Another notable was Dan Hooker versus Mateusz Gamrot. That's the one where Dan Hooker in the middle of one of the rounds while he's all beat up and bloody and shit and was like, I love this shit. One of the funnier things that's been said in the cage. But shit was hilarious because he just sounded punch drunk as shit, but it was still entertaining. And then you have the main, oh, there's that picture for Gamrot versus Hooker, just one of the best fights of the year, I think. And then you had the unfortunate rear naked choke of Israel Adesanya by DDP Dricus du Plessis to win that, or I'm sorry, defend his title in his first title defense against the former champ. Waiting to see what happens with Adesanya this year, looking to see what kind of a run he makes this year. Hopefully coming back for the better, getting back in that win column. Moving over to 306, this was Noche UFC in the Sphere in Las Vegas. One of the biggest, hyped events because of all the money they spent. They wound up having to partner with Riyadh Season with the Saudis to kind of fund the rest of this, because it was upwards of 25 mil to get this entire card put together and event to be done. Just craziness, man. But it was a long card. It was like over 3 hours long because of all of the antics in between, the visuals, everything else that happened throughout the entire night, throughout the entire event. So wasn't the best card in the world because they spent so much money on the venue, so much money on the production, that they just couldn't put together the biggest card in the world. So it's pretty understandable, I guess. But yeah, some of the bigger things that happened in that fight, we had Raul Rosas Jr. opening that one, by the way, wins by unanimous decision. We had Ketlin Souza versus Yasmin Uruguay, which, nope, this is Ignacio Bahamondes versus Manuel Torres in that top picture. And that was a big counter right to knock out Manuel Torres by Ignacio Bahamondes. That fight at the bottom is actually, what fight is that? Oh, that is Souza versus Uruguay. I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking, but that's Ketlin Souza getting the rear naked choke win for the performance of the night bonus in the first round over Uruguay. Moving over to the main, this is about the middle of the card. Oh, we had one of the crazier shit that happened. Esteban Ribovics versus Daniel Zellhuber, contested for probably the fight of the year by a lot of people. They actually won some awards, I think, for that. But Ribovics versus Zellhuber, one of the craziest, bloodiest fights in the middle of the card here. Actually, this was on the main card. What am I saying? It was a split decision win for Ribovics, but man, it was a crazy ass fight. Before that, though, in the last prelim of the night, we had Norma Dumont versus Irene Aldana, and that's the picture you see at the bottom. Irene Aldana suffered like 3 really nasty cuts, that biggest one being on her forehead leading into her eyebrow there. She had another one under her eyebrow on the side and one on her nose, and man, she is stitched up. It's taken a long time for that to heal. One of the crazier cuts and bloodiest faces I've seen in the sport. And that leads us into the main event here with the 2 title fights. Valentina Shevchenko gaining the title back over Alexa Grasso in a fight where Grasso just looked lost. It happened in the fight that they came to a draw in after she, choked or got that submission over Valentina, where it basically turned the color of her face because she was doing that face crank. Got the win off of that, wins the belt, and then they come to a draw in the second fight. In the third fight, Valentina comes out the winner. Wasn't the funnest fight in the world, but Valentina looked pretty good. Alexa looked lost, and she lost her title for sure. So then you had the upset, Merab Dvalishvili beating Sugar Sean O'Malley in a fight that a lot of people said was possible for Merab to win, and he definitely showed and proved that he could. Just dominating on the ground with the takedowns and the grappling. Did a damn good job. It wasn't, again, the most exciting fight in the world, and Sugar Sean just didn't know what to do with it. So loses the title there. New bantamweight champion for the UFC is Merab Dvalishvili after UFC 306. Yeah. Moving into 307, we had Pereira, once again, the third and final fight of 2024 for Alex Pereira versus Khalil Roundtree at UFC 307. Definitely a fun fight, definitely entertaining, definitely respectable. Roundtree's a maniac, talking about how he was in the happiest state of his life after that fight, even though his face was so nasty, busted open like Irene Aldana's was in at the Noche card. But we also had Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena fighting for the women's bantamweight division. This was another change of titles. Juliana Pena beating Raquel Pennington. We'll get to that one in just a second, but earlier in the card, let me get to that. Ryan Spann versus Ovince St. Preux. We had Ryan Spann with this standing guillotine choke over Ovince St. Preux, which wound up being St. Preux's last fight in the UFC. He's now signed to the Global Fight League, so you can watch him over there this year when that starts up in April. That's that top picture there. And then we had Joaquin Buckley with an impressive win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, even though Stephen Thompson is a bit older, looked a little slower than usual, but still put up a damn good fight against Buckley, the young buck. And but Buckley was able to do what he did in that last fight night versus Colby Covington. And this happened before it, obviously, but yeah, this is what led to him getting that fight against Covington. And he just made a good vet look bad by knocking him out like that. One of the first times Stephen Thompson's gotten knocked out that way. Joaquin Buckley with that big knockout win at UFC 307. And that brings us to the last two main fights, the co-main and the main event. Juliana Pena winning the bantamweight championship with the big win over Raquel Pennington. As you can see here, that nasty overhand right by Pena. That's a crazy picture there. And then you see the blood coming out of Khalil Roundtree's face with the multiple gigantic gashes in his head from all of the, I mean, Alex Pereira, man, the leg kicks, the body kicks, the body punches, he wears you down, wears you out, hurts you. He makes you feel like you can't walk, and then he busts your fucking face open with all the left hooks, with all the jabs, and the big overhands. I mean, he does it all. It's impressive as hell. He's really good on his feet. Not sure what he can do on the ground. Not sure what his defense would look like, but on the feet, not too many people can really beat him. So that's something to look out for this year, of course. Let's move over to UFC 308. Almost there, almost to the end. Running a little long, but no big deal. First show back. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Yet another heartbreaker involving Topuria beating all of our favorites, but that shows and proves how good he is, and how good he was in 2024 for sure. Winning the title and then defending it against two guys that are just known to be entertaining, known to be fan favorites, known to be tough fights, and Topuria coming out on top in both of them. We also had Robert Whittaker versus Hamza Chimaev. Boris, of course, coming in looking like a beast in this one and getting the win there. Our friend in the chat, Boris Chimaev super fan, I'm sure was happy about that one. But at the rest of the card, we had a brawl and a bloody ass fight with Rebecca versus Mateusz Rebecca versus Miktek Orabai. This one was nasty, went the full 3 rounds. performance of the night for both these guys because of the warrior Orobai look at how busted up he is, blood everywhere. Rebecca was the one causing all the damage, of course, so that was a great fight. Then we had Shara Bullet Magomedov versus Armin Petrosyan, who's getting a title fight, right, by the way, against Makhachev. But am I right about that? Main card. Am I right about that? Why do I feel like, no, that's not right. No, not Petrosyan. Okay, good. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. Anyway, Shara Bullet getting a big double spinning back fist win over Armin Petrosyan. I think I'm getting Sarukian. That's what it is. I get those two mixed up all the time. But the crazy ass double spinning back fist for Shara Bullet. Who the fuck even thinks about doing that? Spins and gets him one way, spins him and gets him the other way. Fucking knocks out Armin Petrosyan. Insane finish there for Shara Bullet at UFC 308. And that brings us to the main two fights, the co-main and the main event. We got Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker. Basically, what we thought was breaking Robert Whittaker's jaw, but it really just displaced his teeth with that face crank. Like we talked about, almost as bad, or if actually worse than that one with Shevchenko earlier that we talked about. But yeah, Khamzat Chimaev looking like a beast, getting that big win over Robert Whittaker. And then we had Ilia Topuria with the first knockdown ever of Max Holloway, and then the first knockout ever of Max Holloway with the left hook to ground strikes. Round 3 of this title fight. Ilia Topuria getting his first title defense against another gigantic name in the sport. And that brings us to 309. Finally, we get the John Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight that everybody was waiting on because of John Jones getting injured. Should have seen it way earlier in the year. Didn't get to. Actually, should have seen it last year, but didn't get to. And then we finally get the fight. And everyone's wondering, like, you know, one of the greatest heavyweights to ever fight in that division, 2-time heavyweight champion, most heavyweight title fight KOs, most heavyweight title defenses, Stipe Miocic versus John Jones, who was the king of the light heavyweight division, 2 division champion, most championship fight wins, most light heavyweight title defenses, legend versus legend. Everyone's talking about the, you know, what could happen, who has the upper hand and all that. Is the age a thing? 1 foot out, 1 foot in for both these guys. You know, just big talk around this one. So, you know, no one knew what to get, but we kind of all knew. John Jones. But earlier in the night, we had Oban Elliott versus Basil Hafez, getting that big knockout with the overhand right for Oban Elliott. 40 seconds into the 3rd round. Performance of the night there for him. Ramiz Brahimaj versus Mickey Gall. Brahimaj gets a big KO with the right hook in the 1st round over Mickey Gall with the performance of the night there. And then we get to the main card. Let's see, nothing else really big happened. There was a lot of decisions on this card, including the top picture there, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler finally coming back and fighting after 2 years of waiting on Conor McGregor. And with Conor's being out with the injury or whatever, he went ahead and fought Charles Oliveira, which, being the showman that he is, he put it out there, but he wasn't able to overcome Oliveira, and gets unanimous decision win for Charles Oliveira. Performance of the night bonus for both of them. And then we get to the main event with the crazy spinning back kick from John Jones after just looking impressive against Stipe. Not really having to worry about much with Stipe. And then Stipe quickly retired after the fight, talking to Joe Rogan in the cage. Just basically said, thank God, I'm done. I'm retired. Going back to being a full-time firefighter and back to his family with all of the accolades that he accomplished and everything else. He's a legend, a future Hall of Famer for sure. So thank you to Stipe, and hopefully he's good in his retirement. John Jones continues to be the heavyweight champion with his first title defense over Stipe Miocic at UFC 309. And finally, UFC 310 wasn't an impressive lineup, but for the last fight, the last pay-per-view of the year, we had a debut fighter fighting in his first fight in the UFC and fighting in a title fight, which is insane. Kaya Sakura coming over from Ryzen, fighting Alexandra Pantoja for the flyweight championship of the world. Pantoja, to defend his title for the third time here, gets the win over Asakura. We'll touch on that again here in a minute. We had two undefeated fighters in the co-main event. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. Rakhmonov being 18-0 with 18 finishes, and Machado Gary 15-0. Has some decisions in there. Hasn't looked that impressive, but he's still undefeated. So 15-0 versus 18-0. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, earlier in the card we had Chase Hooper versus Clay Guida in a crazy kind of chess match on the ground. But in 3 minutes and 41 seconds into the first round, Chase Hooper gets a submission by armbar that the animal crazy Clay Guida tried to get out of, but just couldn't. Rolling every which way, couldn't get out of the armbar. Chase Hooper sinks it in tighter, gets the win in the performance of the night there. Kennedy Nzechukwu and Lucas Beretsky started off the night with a first round finish for Nzechukwu. Big right hand, right hook to ground strikes, getting that TKO over Beretsky in the first round, and the performance of the night bonus there. And then we get to the main card, main events. Nothing else big happened throughout that. Eric Anders gets a TKO win over Chris Weidman. Michael Chiesa gets a submission rear naked choke over Max Griffin. And that's really it until we get to Vicente Luque versus Themba Garimbo. And Vicente Luque gets a anaconda choke submission 52 seconds into the first round over Garimbo, which was crazy because Garimbo was the favorite there. So Dominic Reyes finally gets back into the win column with the win over Anthony Smith by TKO. Anthony Smith fighting after one of his closest friends passed away and coach, so that was a tough one. And then Duho Choi, Korean Superboy versus Nate the Train Landwehr. Korean Superboy gets the third round finish in the 3 minutes and 21 seconds in. TKO by elbows from Crucifix, which was a nasty finish for him there. Bryce Mitchell knocks out Kron Gracie on crazy elbow knockout after just a weird fight. Cyril Gane versus Volkov. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. Rakhmonov moves to 19-0, stays undefeated. Ian Gary put up a pretty good fight, but gets the loss there by unanimous decision. And then that takes us to Kaya Sakura versus Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja defending his belt for the third time over the champion in Ryzen, coming over to the UFC in his debut for his first fight ever in the UFC, fighting for a title, and gets finished in 2 minutes of the second round by rear naked choke. So that's it. That was our last card of the year, and that's the last one for this show and for tonight. So time to wrap it up because I'm about talked out, but that was fun. A good reminder of everything that went on this year. Pay-per-view wise, let's see what kind of big pay-per-views we come up with this year. I'm hoping for lots of good fights. I'm hoping for lots of big events, and I'm hoping for just some massive knockouts, good submissions, crazy fights, and just hopefully an entertaining year all around. And not too many injuries, hopefully, and I'm sure we'll see a bunch of retirements like we saw this year. But that's about it. I'm just hoping for a good year of MMA, a good year of UFC, and a good year all around. And I hope that you all have the same. Thank you again to everybody in the chat. Infinity, Tommy, my mom, who else was in there? Chimaev Superfan, Mud MMA. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate the interaction. Thank you to my sponsor, Noctane Smelling Salts. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with everybody. You can follow me on all my social media. It's been going on down there the whole night. And yeah, that's it for me. Come back next week, next Thursday. I'm out of here. See you fuckers next time. Take it easy. Peace.